Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityoma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityoma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityoma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om We attain glory of God. We attain.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Chitheads. My guest today is Mary Reilly Nichols. Mary holds a BA in anthropology from Harvard University and completed 5 years of residency in meditation ashrams in India and the U.S. A devoted student of Muktananda, she has taught yoga and meditation in New York City for over 30 years. Her teaching combines Iyengar, integral, and Anusara styles of Hatha yoga with the Upanishadic tradition of the wisdom and experience of non-duality. She offers frequent workshops on classical yoga philosophy and psychology, including Advaita non-dualism and the tantric methods of Kashmiri Shaivism. Currently, Ms. Nichols teaches stress management in psychiatric settings and is involved in ongoing research on the mind-body benefits of yoga and meditation. So hello, Mary. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to be able to talk to you today. I met you at, I guess it was the Nalanda Institute for Contemplative Science, and I remember you gave a short speech, and I was just totally blown away by you. I thought you spoke with such passion and obvious love for the teachings that you were sharing. So to start off with, I would just love to hear a little bit about your story and what brought you to yoga practice. You've been practicing and teaching for so long now. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I got into yoga sort of circuitously from studying anthropology. Mm-hmm. And in college, my focus in anthropology was ecstatic religion.
Ah, that sounds fun.
I know, and I loved it. I was so excited about this topic, and I had a Kundalini awakening while writing about ecstatic religion.
Whoa.
And I'll tell you very briefly how that happened. So I was writing about small-scale societies which have ecstatic religious movements, mm-hmm. and these are usually when these societies are in breakdown. Mm. Their institutions are breaking down because in a lot of these cases, contact with Western culture, much more technologically advanced cultures, and this would seem to precipitate a very typical and similarly structured activity of ecstatic religious movement.
Wow.
So as I was writing one night in my room, I was so excited. It felt like I was getting on to something, and I had the thought as I was writing, it was kind of corny, generalized thought, but it was, our society, modern Western civilization, is on the breakdown also because of contact and of global warming, which wasn't really happening then, but there was things going on, and I could see the breakdown of social institutions, marriage, medicine. People didn't trust, anything anymore, any of our institutions. And I said, the thought came, well, we must be due for a massive ecstatic religious transformation, because ecstatic religion happens as a way to produce new paradigms which are adaptive to the new reality.
Right.
So the moment I had that thought, there was an explosion, this thing you may have heard of, this explosive feeling at the base of the spine, movement of energy up the spine, which was wiggling, and it felt like a fire hose. That was what I thought of when I had the experience. And then the whole room and myself dissolved into white light. And the white light spoke to me, actually, and said, there's a great master in your lifetime, and you will recognize him. Okay? That's what happened.
Shit.
So I know. And I came down, and I remember jumping up and looking at my chair like it might have been responsible for this thing. I ran out and told my roommate, and she's like, whatever, you've been on the pipe or something. And I hadn't been smoking, at that particular moment. So I then thought, well, that was really weird, and I should try not to take it too seriously, but many more experiences happened over the next 18 months, and I thought I had epilepsy.
Wow.
Because they were very body. And I would feel that I left my body. I had very extraordinary experiences of leaving my body. I heard the sound Om, which I didn't know was Om, and it was very frightening. So I went to the health services, and I went to 3 psychiatrists, and I had EEGs, and they said there was no evidence of a, temporal lobe epilepsy or whatever they thought it might be. I just went along. And then the day came when I met Swami Muktananda, and he blessed me. We used to go, the first day I met him, I went up on this line. I didn't know what I was looking at. I was like, whatever, I'm not interested in this. But there's this guy. I pranamed, because that's what people were doing. He bopped me with peacock feathers. I went home, and I had amazing experiences of the awakened Shakti, and it went from there.
Wow. So before you met Muktananda and you were sort of studying these ecstatic religions, you read about these ecstatic experiences, but you didn't really have any words for what was happening to you. Did you attribute it to what you were reading, or was it a separate experience at that point?
Well, I thought, and at Harvard, and maybe all colleges, kids would have nervous breakdowns, and a lot of times, and I had a few friends, the quality of their delusions related to what they were studying.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm out of my mind.
Yeah. It just happens to be aligned with what I'm reading about.
Exactly. So I was keeping it to myself, trying to.
So you didn't have so much of the terminology then, but for those that might be new to this kind of experience, Kundalini Awakening, can you describe the philosophy of that experience for those who might be new to it?
Well, and I don't want to scare people with my experience. Don't think that's...
It excites me. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah, some of us do like that sort of thing, and I do. And when I was with Muktananda, he clocked that I was a space cowboy like you are, and we like it, So he gave it to me, man. I mean, he says, "You want to go? We're gonna go." It was like we drank each other under the table type of thing. It was really fun, and I would think, God, I'm not even holy. I don't know why this is happening, but he would say occasionally things to say, if you love the God intoxication, that's good.
Yeah.
Instead of some people going, this is just nothing. You shouldn't be that. This is not, that's not the truth. It's not the way. And he said, never mind that. If you like it, that's great stuff.
Yeah.
So that was the way I was oriented. So, but the philosophy, or if you will, maybe even spiritual technology that we're talking about, is that there, and the notion of the power or energy, which is potential, and it tend to be at the base of the spine of the human nervous system, which can be unleashed through contact with an awakened being, through the deliberate initiation by a great, master, or sometimes spontaneous, such as happened to me. This notion is not specific only to the yogic tradition, because you will see that different traditions do talk about it, and I often mention the caduceus, which is the Greek symbol of health, which shows a pole around which are two snakes which meet at the top. That is the actual map of the Kundalini Shakti, which pertains to Hatha yoga.
Wow.
Ha and Ta, it refers to one of those serpent. The Ha is the, I believe, the masculine energy, and the Ta, the so-called feminine, or the passive and the active.
Yeah.
And I usually say, because I thought about it for a long time, why are these two energies supposed to be equilibrated in yoga? And I understood. I was actually thinking about it while I was vacuuming the floor, and I lost power because I try to get the vacuum to go all over the apartment without having to plug it in different places. And I went over, and the plug had come away from one of the outlets there, and I had to plug it in. I said, "Aha, AC/DC."
Yeah.
This is almost an electronic thing. Now you see the caduceus. We know the Greeks must have known about this energy, and there's other. Of course, the Kung Bushmen talk about the power that at the base of the spine. They get it to arise through chanting. So you can, and then the Quakers and the Shakers were ecstatic, and they quaked and they shook, and the quaking and the shaking is a body expression of this awakened energy. And when you quake and shake, the bake and shake too, but the quaking and the shaking is a purification of tension in your nervous system, which is also like psychological tension and emotional tension. Okay? And the relief of tension is really what samadhi is.
Yeah.
Samadhi and enlightenment is a profound cessation of tension.
Wow. That's amazing. I don't think I've ever heard someone explain it so amazingly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just so in a way that's not sort of mystifying, but actually very graspable. I mean, it's really you're explaining it in a way that I think is many people can get on board with. It doesn't sound too hippy dippy, even though the hippy dippy is great too.
Yes, of course.
So then, a question that sort of occurred to me while we've been talking about this is, do you think then that there are a lot of instances of spontaneous activation of this energy, but due to the fact that the kind of vocabulary to understand it is not available in the mainstream, that these experiences get misdiagnosed or diagnosed, period,
Yes.
by a physician, by a psychiatrist, who would say, okay, this is indicative of whatever,
delusion.
Whatever delusion.
Psychosis.
Yeah.
I think that's very true. I have a great friend who is a person who adapt with the Kundalini Shakti, and he is a psychiatrist, and he has a great sort of way to understand people's different psychotic states. But I think he thinks these are perhaps expressions of awakened energy. A lot of times when you get a samadhi, you feel like you're God, and you might go around saying, "I'm Jesus," or
Which many people have.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And so then that could be one of the things that happens, because I know sometimes when people are saying that they're God or they're the Archangel Michael, they're all actually having a very universal kind of experience, an oceanic experience.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk a little bit, if you will, about how these experiences and why having these experiences now, why doing yoga is an adaptive way to proceed in reality as we are now. So the science that we have, which is quantum physics, which is our most advanced kind of science that is very useful. Quantum physical equations are used in all of our electronics and everything. It's real stuff that we use. And it pertains to, and it is relevant to, the non-dual awareness, which is the feature of samadhi, and which yoga, which is symmetrically moving your body in such a way as you can apprehend the unity behind duality. And quantum physics, I'm a lay person, but I can read a little bit, and so it does deal with uncertainty, because the state of uncertainty, the non-dual way of apprehending reality is a more advanced way, if you will. It's more primitive to say it's black or it's white, that sort of believing in categories.
Yeah.
And so the shaking up of categories and the tolerance of uncertainty is something that we're developing by doing yoga and by doing Hatha yoga, so that we can go beyond dualistic thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's such an incredible way to put it, and it's making me think a little bit about and you're doing a workshop this weekend on the Yoga Sutras, and my kind of understanding of Yoga Sutras, which of course is inspired, or not of course, but it is inspired by Edwin Bryan's translation. He talks a lot about, or the understanding is that Samkhya metaphysics is a dualistic system, that ultimately it's dualist. And from a certain perspective, it's not necessarily what's happening with Vedanta or Shaivism as a non-dual practice is different from what's happening with Samkhya. Do you understand it in that way?
I understand what it is. I'm using his translation, which I think is the best one, and that's one of the objections that I have to, I think that, and there's this thing called beta, which means dual, non-dual.
Yeah.
To me, the Samkhya system, of course, it's dualism which leads to non-dualism. And you can see throughout Patanjali that Patanjali wants you to be in the non-dual state. And but the way you get there is to separate the Samkhya sort of path. Well, first of all, Samkhya means enumeration, or it has to do with listing. So you're going to see, and in Buddhism too, there's 5 this, there's 8 that. And that's a mnemonic device so that people who are memorizing stuff, oh, wait, what are the 5 kleshas again? And because there's 5 fingers, so you can remember these things as tools in a society where you don't have iPads to look up stuff, And but the Samkhya idea, and I really get a little crazy when people start going, it's dual and the other one's non-dual. Well, that's just not useful. It's like, I don't care. It's like, how am I going to get to samadhi? Okay, so the non-dual is to partly of what is going on in Patanjali, and they go, it's Purusha and Prakriti, which means the Purusha is the static witness, and Prakriti is natural. Your chakras are itching. That's what's going on. Prakriti is the nature, which is changeable, and time, So, but it is very useful. You want to go to non-duality? Get into the witness state.
Yeah.
So do detach.
Yeah.
So his dualism is a form of a tool for detaching.
Yeah.
Your identification. It's weird. It's what happens is you disidentify completely, and then you go into full identification.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because that's actually that's how I've sort of had to, what's the word when you can bring things together? Reconcile. That's how I've been able to reconcile them in my own understanding, is that, when you're first starting this practice, you need to be able to detach yourself from your bullshit.
Yes.
You need to be able to establish a kind of separation.
Yes.
You can't just immediately identify, because you'll be identifying with all of your neuroses and the stuff that's making you suffer. So that's not very helpful, right? So it's like a part of the path, in a certain sense, is to be able to understand the world dualistically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. How great. And so they're both, they, in a way, dual, non-dual is non-duality. To see non-duality in dualism,
right,
is really
well, and exactly, and my teacher actually says the same thing. He says, even when you say the non-dual, you're already establishing a duality, because because the duality between dualism and non-dualism. So there's already a paradox there.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
I love it.
Yeah. We're geeking out here, everybody. So let's talk about Muktananda. I would love to hear a little more about the story. You mentioned him briefly, but I would love to hear the story of how you met him and the impact that he's had on your life, and how, obviously he took your practice to the next level. So love to hear about that.
In a way, I've had to come to the conclusion that I really was kind of had a strong destiny with Muktananda because of those previous experiences that were telling me I was going to meet a master, and I really didn't believe that, but it did happen, and then my cathexis. You know that word? It means it's Freudian, I think. It means intense, energetic, psychological focus.
Yeah.
You get a cathexis, like when you have a crush. It's like boom.
Yeah.
And my thing with him was just complete and total. I mean, he destroyed me, I have to say. And when I say that, people get worried and upset. He really, really effectively obliterated my ego, and I'll tell you a little about that. But so I meet the guy. So when I actually met him, I told you I went home and I was having all these experiences. So I go on this line. There's this weird-looking guy, man. He was sitting there. He was bald. It was June in the Catskills. There was no air conditioning in the hall, and I recall, was bare-chested and was sitting in this lotus posture, and he was kind of wiggling and moving about in a sort of a very weird way, and I couldn't understand what I was looking at, like it was from Mars, okay? And I looked down because I was horrified. I mean, what is that? Is that a person? It's just bizarro. And he starts hitting me with the feathers, and I go back to my seat, and I'm staring at this oddity, and he starts talking about meditating on the sound of Om. And I didn't know what really Om was or any of this. Even though I was interested in ecstatic religion, I did no yoga, no meditation. So I had a few days before I met him, I had one of my weird experiences, and this is what it was. I woke up, looked out my window, and I suddenly heard this incredible blast, this sound, okay? And it kind of like was a trumpet. And it was so loud, and I'm looking at the window, I said, everyone in the world hears this sound. That was my intuition. It is, even though it wasn't bursting my eardrums, but I sensed everyone's hearing this. Oh my God, this is the end of the world. This is happening to me. I'm looking out the window, I'm hearing this sound, and out of the sky comes this thing, which I didn't know was a flying saucer, and it was full of lights, and it was coming and zoomed at me, and it hit my third eye, and then I woke up. So I wasn't really awake. I thought I was awake. It was a quote-unquote dream. It was it was a vision, really. So for the next few days, I couldn't get the sound out of my head. And the thing about it was that it had no beginning and no end. I don't know how to say that, but I could hear that sound was almost like a tambura, which goes in on itself.
Yeah.
It seems to have no bottom, no place where it starts. I know that sounds odd, but it's what it sounded like. So, it turns out Om is called the unstruck sound. And so I'm thinking about that sound while I'm looking at this crazy-looking man, and he's talking about meditating on Om. He points to me. There's about 1,000 people in the audience, and he points right at me and says, that's what you're doing now. You're meditating on Om. And I was like, what the fuck? And I turned around to make a big display of, it doesn't mean me. I have no idea who he's talking about. But I kind of knew so that was my first encounter, right?
Wow.
I know. Then I go home. I have the first thing that happened, honestly. I'll tell only one more of those crazy things, but I sat down in my bedroom and I said, well, they were meditating. I'll put myself in a lotus posture. And I was immediately drawn to the sense that I was at the foot of the cross, of the crucified Christ, at 3 p.m. in the real, with people crying. And I'm like, holy shit, right? So then it began to dawn on me that all this stuff that had been happening was that Muktananda was the guy I was told that
Yeah.
I was going to meet. And now I go from being a daughter and a friend and a everybody knows me, to being a crazy person. Okay, so I'm going, oh my God, I've met this, I've Kundalini, all this shit. So now
People,
I really
were your friends and family think you'd gone a little cuckoo?
cult. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was studied cult. No, it's a cult. In my view, everything's a cult.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a cult. This entire experience is cult-ish.
Yeah.
Republicans and Democrat, whatever. So they would call me a cult crazy. Luckily, my parents were extremely liberal and also so self-involved. They didn't care that much, which was really lucky, because they, caring parents would have had me, kidnapped and taken away and tried to programmed. But they didn't give a shit. So that was the great thing. I love, they were wonderful, wild and crazy, both of them. And they didn't care. So that much. So the only place I could go with this unbelievably profound experience was back to the ashram. And I would, I visited several times, but now when I saw Muktananda, I was in complete awestruck terror. More so, I think, than many of the people who would have been encountering the guy. I mean, he was weird, and he really did awaken people's Shakti very shockingly and powerfully. But in my case, I think I had that double dose of reverence because of my experiences prior. So I still had another year of college, which I did, and I was having all sorts of stuff going on. If you want to know more about the sort of powerful Kundalini experience that I had, his book, which is called Play of Consciousness, details all of his experiences, and I had kind of little versions of the things he talks about, but including when I lived with, so then I started living in the ashram after college. I went to India. He frickin' reamed me the fuck out in India. He completed the job there. He really did. And I'll tell you about that another time, but baby, he took me all the way. And anyway, I was like looking at him like, are you fucking kidding me? You would do this to just an average girl like that? Like, what am I going to do with this? But anyway.
So that was about the age of like
21.
21.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then I tried to reintegrate into the world, and it didn't work at all. I was, here I am, a Harvard grad. I'm fired from working in a copy shop. I'm fired from this job. I was fired constantly. My boyfriend was not going to be my boyfriend anymore, and he was like out of there, and nobody wanted any part of me, and I had to actually stay in the ashram, and I became on staff there. So I did 5 years, and I loved it. We used to get up really early, like 3:30 or 4, and every thought was service, so I learned seva. Well, time went on. I did leave the ashram, but now, I'm a 61-year-old woman. Like my husband just got this accident, right? And he's okay, but he's got 2 broken limbs, some surgery, and all this stuff. The seva is kicking in.
Yeah.
The remembrance, uninterrupted loving service. And it makes everything so easy. You're not resentful, you know? And you're doing yoga. When you serve your husband, you realize that it's not about, I'll do yoga and you can go fuck yourself. It's a different thing that we do. Sorry about that. Is that okay?
No, it's okay. Yeah, we have a lot of sassy talk on these episodes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think anybody who's listening minds. So this is such an amazing story. You should definitely write a book about your ecstatic experiences. I think people would love to hear about that. So I want to know a little bit. Muktananda was famous for, being one of the forerunners. Is that the right word? Forerunner of bringing Kashmir Shaivism to the West, and a tradition that for me has been profoundly influential. And but it really almost went completely, it was almost lost.
Yes.
So thank you, Muktananda, and Lakshmanju. I know he was one of the central figures.
Yes.
So what does Kashmiri Shaivism mean to you in terms of what it has brought to our understanding of yoga?
Well, yeah, and we, for the first few years while I was going through all that stuff, I heard about the philosophies, but they weren't like really that interesting to me. I didn't care that much, but we chanted a lot in our ashram. We were very devotional, and chanting was where the Shakti, your Kundalini Shakti likes chanting, okay? But then later on, the Kashmiri Shaivism, it's as if it's the most sophisticated, if you will. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's modern and refined. And I've been noticing, since I'm studying Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, that the Shiva Sutra is a bit of a riff off of the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. I see there's some things going on where, because for example, the first Yoga Sutra, the first is Hatha Yoga Nushashanam. That's not it. The first sutra that's important is Yoga's Chittam Vritti Nirodha. Yoga's the stilling of the Chittam Vritti. And the wonderful thing Patanjali's doing there is saying there's this thing, Chittam. I'm sure they must have known that in his day, but Chittam is mind, but it's a substance that can have qualities like Vritti. And Vritti, you know what it is by saying it. It's like a twist, it's a turn, it's a vortex. Well, then Kashmir Shaivism, the first Shiva Sutra is Chaitanyam Atma. Chitti. What's important that Kashmiri Shaivism, it says, by the way, this Chittam where the Vrittis go is God. That's the really important thing that's happening here in Kashmiri Shaivism. The mind is God in contraction.
Yeah.
And therefore, you don't want to like whip it into shape or punish it. It's divine. And you can enthrone it with love and mantra, which is, elevate feed the mind, the beauty. So it's to the reverence for chitti, is I think the feature of Kashmiri Shaivism. It's not this thing you wrestle or it's so hard to deal with, monkey mind. I don't like that because monkeys are great and we're related to them, but don't denigrate it. It's God, okay?
Yeah.
And the most amazing thing is that the last pada of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the last chapter, it's called Kaivalya Pada. And Kaivalya means supremely alone.
Yeah.
And when you're in full samadhi, you feel like you're the only being on earth, in the universe.
Yeah.
It's the most amazing thing. It's like that's where there's no tension at all. It's all the one. So that's Kaivalya. And Patanjali talks about the power of the mind in the last two chapters, what you can do with it if you focus the mind. You become what you focus on, and that's a lot of what his third chapter is the secret. That secret stuff about what you as you think, so you become, and all that.
Yeah.
We're a little over it, but he thought of it way first in a much more elegant way.
Thanks, Patanjali.
Yeah.
The original secret
exactly.
by Patanjali.
Yeah. But Kashmiri Shaivism to me is about they understand the mind as God, and that's how useful that way of thinking about our mind.
That's amazing. I really, really love the way that you tied the Shiva Sutras into Patanjali's Yoga Sutras in that way, because it makes total sense. Do you think, though, that, if you were to teach someone, yoga philosophy as you do you think it makes sense, like sequentially, to start then with the Yoga Sutras? This kind of goes back to what we were saying about how, first you got to disentangle yourself from all of the crap before you recognize that the crap's God. Yes. Do you think that actually, in terms of like pedagogically, how we introduce this stuff?
I love it. Yeah, I think that's a great justification for you taking on Patanjali first. That's what we're doing in this program that I'm teaching. And I love that you just gave the reason for it. Exactly. Because that's Shaivism stuff is it's refined stuff that should be prefaced by some basic roots in some practice.
Yeah. And it requires, I think Yoga Sutra really requires you to do a lot more work on your body, mind, and on your psychological afflictions, right? And we want to clear those out, right? We want to clarify before we can start to realize.
My kind of radical thing is that you can don't skip the Yoga Sutras, but if you want to play around with Shaivism while you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, I guess some people are just going to be called to. I mean, I feel much more inspired reading the Shiva Sutras than I've ever felt reading the Yoga Sutras. The Yoga Sutras feels like a little bit of a chore. It feels like it gets a little bit, redundant, clunky, and there's a lot of lists, you know. There's like, oh gosh, another 10 commandments. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Those virtues are like, oh, brother.
Yeah, exactly.
Not me. No, why do I have to?
Yeah. So yeah, but Shiva Sutras is like, oh yeah, I mean, everything is divine. It sounds really good.
Yeah, that's it.
So to speak, so in the same vein then, and that's what I really love actually reading, and I don't think I've mentioned this on the episode yet, but I've been reading, your writings on your website, which for everybody listening, please read, and we're going to feature some of them on embodiedphilosophy.com. Mary gave me her permission, so I'm excited to share some of those with you because they're really profoundly beautiful, and what we can tell you do so well, Mary, is integrating these traditions, being able to understand them all as a part of the same kind of thread of spiritual evolution.
Yes.
Because it's very easy, I think, for me, as previously sort of on the academic path, I'm still kind of stuck in this categorizing mode where I want to be like, well, this is this tradition, and this tradition says this, and that's different from this.
Yeah.
I'm still in the practice of drawing distinctions, in a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
And you really don't sacrifice the understanding of the tradition, and that's what I think is something that happens a lot, and we were talking about this before the episode, and I would love to hear you talk a little bit about this the difference between melting everything together in a way that is not true to the essence of what these teachings are, in a way that kind of turns this tradition into something that it isn't. Mm-hmm. And what I see you doing, which is really being able to bring them together, just like I said before, you're bringing these traditions together, but understanding that they are part of the same journey and the same path without, melting them all together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that I understand what you're saying, and it's almost like there's a sequential and linear way to apprehend the tradition, and then there's a holistic way which shows that in any full expression of the tradition, you're going to see all of the traditions in it somehow. It's like it's like a hologram.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was something else I wanted. Oh, I have a thought. Do you want to
please
hear it?
Let's have a thought.
Okay. So I'm noticing too that I have a few thoughts, but one of them is that we kind of mystify and make holy these higher states of consciousness as a sort of as a species, as we are as humans. And we see Jesus Christ, okay, and if you look at Patanjali, you will see that he is an expression of a guy who has mastered these things that Patanjali talks about, such as there's in the 3rd chapter, he talks about being able to walk on water, making yourself that light, making yourself dissolve, because there were the disciples talk about seeing him dissolve. If you've ever read Autobiography of a Yogi, there's also descriptions of Babaji doing stuff like that. So Patanjali talks about that. Oh, here we go. We're gonna, it's like in Star Wars. The Ewoks were like worshiping when some of the heroes came into their little compound, and they were like, ooh, and they were like doing like pranams, right?
Yeah.
So really, what we're talking about is the evolution of consciousness. That's where we're headed. We are primitive, but in 1,000,000 years, or I don't know how long it's going to take, that will be the capacity of our this instrument, and we call it holy, but it's really just what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And even Jesus said, "You will say to the mountain, move, and it will move." So, I mean, there's a part of me which says, you could just be scientific about this and say that what we're doing is trying to generate the next evolutionary step in our consciousness before the shit hits the fan here and we're all getting the Darwin Award, which it may be in this planet. So let's bump it up.
What's the Darwin Award?
The Darwin Award is when someone does something really foolish and gets eliminated from the gene pool. So it's basically when you're doing something that's so maladaptive that you will not
you will not survive.
Yeah. So this is an adaptive thing that I love, because to me nature is the tool which shapes our consciousness and is forcing us to become developed. Now, a lot of biological scientists don't like that, because that means there's a purpose and a consciousness behind it all, and they don't like to say that nature is honing. We were yeast cells. That was our ancestor. So why are you and I talking like this? To me, nature, because of stress. If there was no stress, we'd all be yeast cells. And so nature's always stressing us, causing us to leap higher.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. Okay, I want to ask you a little bit about, you wrote this article on your website. Hatha yoga is Kundalini yoga. Would you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. I, in a way, referred to it a little bit in when I talked about the caduceus, which is, if you look at maps of the spiritual subtle body based in Hatha yoga. Well, the word ha and ta, as you probably know, refers to sun, moon, which is positive, negative, which is the Ida and the Pingala.
Yeah.
So these seers that could actually see the Sushumna, which is the central channel. And if you do spend a lot of time doing these practices, you will get to see within yourself stuff. I can't see it like that detailed, but I've seen a lot in there when I'm really, meditating and chanting for hours a day. You see shit. So anyway, there's this central channel, and then there are these two energies called the Ida and the Pingala. Now, Hatha yoga is supposed to, you're doing things with your body to make as they say, the energy in the Ha and Ta becomes equal, and when that's equalized, like plugging something into the AC/DC power, the power goes on in the central channel. And so, of course, people are kind of confused, I think, about what Hatha yoga is about. They think it's advanced if you can kiss your own ass, as I say. And look,
while upside down, standing on one fingertip.
That's it. You're the greatest. So, but when my Kundalini was awoken and others around Muktananda, you would see spontaneous Hatha yoga poses happening, and sort of for example, people would stretch out a leg and come forward doing the Maha Mudra. Sometimes it's called just a half seated forward bend. So the things you do with your body in Hatha yoga enable the Kundalini Shakti. It gives her ability to move around.
Yeah.
Okay, you're helping it.
Yeah.
And also, the greatest thing is those are the physical things. But if you do mental gestures, then the Kundalini leaps. Once your Kundalini is awakened and it becomes this internal guru. Jesus talked about this too. So what happens is, okay, if I'm thinking a really contracted negative thought, I feel like my Kundalini doesn't like it, and I feel crappy, and I don't feel my luminousness.
Yeah.
Now, when I think a happy, joyful, good thought of unity, so I'm doing my work, I'm doing the cognitive gesture, then the Kundalini says, yeah, that's the way, and gives me a shot of bliss.
Yeah.
And it keeps doing that. So you start to say, do I want a shot of bliss or do I want to feel like shit? So then you keep doing what it likes you to do. And one of the things it likes you to do is Hatha yoga, because that makes the energy flow, as they say, prana flowing evenly. Is what prana samachare samadarshanam in the Shiva Sutra. When prana samachare, sama is even, so evenness of prana, samadarshanam gives you the darshan of equality or samadhi. Yeah.
Wow. Far out. So,
I love
so
having
now
another geek here.
Yeah,
You know I can't talk like this.
I'm
to
geeking out
almost
about
anybody.
this. This whole conversation is so amazing. So I want to ask you now, just from a perspective of someone who's been teaching and has been, through many stages of an evolving yoga world. Are you? I don't know. Maybe I know the answer to this just from our conversation, but do you feel optimistic about the state of yoga right now, or do you feel are you of two minds about it? I mean, I guess what I'm implying is that, as we know, yoga has been sort of reduced in most people's minds to a physical practice, and these teachings that we're talking about. I mean, most people don't know anything about what we're talking about and practice yoga and might consider themselves yogis. Yes. They've never heard about Kundalini Shakti. They don't really even, and maybe they just kind of categorize it as, oh, that's the weird religious stuff, and that's not what yoga is anymore. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I'd love your thoughts on that. Like, if you feel that this movement towards physical fitness is problematic, so anything you want to share.
Well, in a way, I see. Of course, I've seen like a huge explosion of yoga since when I left the ashram in 1981. It was like yogurt, you do yogurt, and all that. So now people all know about it. No, I'm very optimistic. I think because of the way evolution works. Okay, you get a meme that gives you an advantage. And I'm going to tell you about that in a second. So you get this thing, like a yogic thing that gives you an advantage in your life, which is an evolutionary adaptive advantage in your survival, makes life okay. You're going to do it. And so as people are going to go through the Hatha yoga physical thing, and they're going to start the Kundalini thing is going to happen. Everyone's Shakti is going to be awake. It has to happen. And it's like, if it doesn't happen, we're going to, it doesn't bode well. But that's okay. The soul is eternal, and we're here.
We've got some time.
We definitely do. We're having a ball, aren't we? Wait, okay, I got to think about.
Yes, what's the meme?
Okay, the meme. Well, a meme, you know what a meme
is?
Yes,
I know what a meme is, yeah.
It would be so the idea of prana, okay, when prana gets abroad and people understand it. Now, we just saw two sets of debates. I'm not going to talk about the candidates, but we had the presidential debates, and then we had the vice presidential debates. Now, the pundits, and pandit is a Sanskrit word for a scholar, but the pundits, after the debates, analyze who won, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the first debate, one of the debaters was fidgeting, moving about, huffing and puffing, and they said he was snorting and blowing his nose, or I don't know, I didn't really watch the whole thing, but they said he was breathing weirdly,
yeah. And
there was a lot of talk about that, and Patanjali says when your mind is disturbed, your breathing will become disrupted. So he wasn't in charge of his prana. She, on the other hand, appeared to be calm. Okay, who won? The calm one, and the one whose prana was under control. She does do yoga, by the way.
Does she?
Yeah, because when she was being grilled at the Benghazi hearings, which were very impressive in terms of her performance, I thought she mentioned there was an off. She was in the hallway going, "Oh, I'm doing some yoga between in the breaks."
Wow.
Okay, so anyway, now in the second debate, which I also didn't watch but heard the pundits, they talked, one guy was calm and smooth and consistent,
yep.
And the other guy was volatile and explosive and weird. So who won? Okay, so this is the advantage of learning to control and use your prana. Now, I'm about to go on a public speaking thing tomorrow. I'm supposed to speak. the whole idea was that Robert Thurman was going to speak to launch our program. And he's a very famous, well-respected, revered master of Buddhism. So he changed his mind. And they said I was going to speak. And I'm like, holy shit, I got to do this? I don't want to. It's like you go to the theater looking for Patti LuPone and you hear that tonight's performance is going to be, someone else, Anyway, so I'm like, oh, this is awful. So I calm myself down. I get ready. And then, oh, my God, he changes his mind. He's going to do it again. I'm like, that's good. Then he changed his mind again, and he's not going to do it. So it's me and Joe Luizzo are going to do it. Okay, I calm myself down. We're going to do it. Then he's going to do it. Then he's not going to do it. Now he's going to do it.
No.
But I got to do it with him.
Oh, no.
That's what I'm doing.
He went back and forth that many times?
There was 3 cancellations, 3 changes, and now it's me and him. Okay.
Robert.
I know.
Robert.
Well, I call it the Shakti.
Yeah.
It's the Shakti.
It's the Spanda.
It is. And, the Shakti will play with you. Are
Yeah.
you really a master? Can you handle it? Mm-hmm. Can you be prepared? And then it doesn't happen and you don't get grasp on, but my plan. Mm-hmm. People who have plans, just stop it. Stop it.
That's going to be the title of this episode. Mary Reilly Nichols on not making plans.
Don't. You can make them, but don't hold on to them because it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
It'll happen completely different, especially if you're on the path. The Shakti's going to say, well, now I'm your teacher, so I'm going to give you experiences, and they're going to be challenging.
Yeah.
So I'm handling this. Of course, I'm terrified of public speaking like anybody, but I'm handling it using pranayama. Like I'm breathing so that I stay calm. And I'm not thinking about the future. That's the other thing. I'm not thinking, what's going to happen tomorrow? What if he does this? What if I do that? No, you prepare, but you're not obsessing about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's two things that you do.
Do you get nervous when you lecture, when you give these talks?
Yeah, slightly. But again, because of the practice of Ishwara Pranidhan, which is what Patanjali calls it, and we call it, bhakti or service. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm serving my guru. If it goes well, if it goes badly, I'm doing my best. I go home. I don't take credit, and I don't take blame. So luckily, if it's shit, it's not my fault. If it's great, it's also not my credit.
Yeah. Wow, I need to learn a little more of that.
That helps.
Yeah, I still have an issue with that for sure. So this has been an amazing conversation, and we're actually going to wrap up this interview and then go record a Facebook Live show, Sadhaka. So those of you who are listening, if you want to see Mary, you can go on. It'll still be on the Facebook page. Obviously, this will be released. This podcast will be released after the live show. But if you go on the Facebook page, Embodied Philosophy, you can find Mary's interview there and see her adorable and luminous face. So here's the last question. I just want to maybe talk about what you think is kind of the least, maybe the teaching that has a lot to offer from the tradition, but is maybe the least talked about. And I know that might put you on the spot. There's a lot to draw from. But if there's one that you could say is sort of the least represented in conversations around yoga today, but has the most to kind of offer us with regards to where we are culturally or individually.
The only thing that's really coming to mind, and this might sound very weird, is Swadhyaya, which can be Om or just chanting Om, how powerful it is, and is throughout the canon. It's so weird that Om is this powerful.
Yeah.
And Patanjali says Om is the guru of the universe.
Yeah.
And then he says repetition of Om leads to realization of its meaning. So it's easy, accessible. The only thing is you have to put your pride away, because if you're, a big shot person, how am I not going to open my mouth and say, "Oh, this is embarrassing." Yeah. So do it alone at home. But it's to me that's a really useful thing, and of course it leads to the spanda and the sensitivity to vibration. And the Hatha Yoga Pradipika they call Om nada.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they say all this that you're doing all this Hatha yoga is in order to become competent to perceive the nada. So in a way, maybe that would be an answer. I don't know.
So when you chant, I'm curious about this actually, and it's interesting that you brought it up because I actually had it down to bring up if we had a little more time. So I'm glad you brought it up. But when you chant, when they're talking about the practice of chanting Om, is it just, and of course, people are like, oh, I chant Om all the time, and at the beginning of my class, I do it 3 times, when they go to a Hatha yoga class, which is, pretty standard. But most people don't chant it continuously. So what is the practice of chanting Om? Is it just that as you would chant 3 times at the beginning of class, so you would do continuously, and you just take a breath in and you chant, and then you take a breath in
again
and you chant
and again
and again.
And it's cool. Like sometimes I neglected in my Hatha yoga also classes, but you can do each of we all breathe in and we all breathe in, or you could all be just at the end of your breath continuous.
Yeah, so it's one continuous Om. Yeah.
And like I've done it in the ashram, man, we've done it for 2 hours. Okay, you do Om for 2 hours in a group, you will have lots of experiences, and you will experience all sorts of stuff, man.
Yeah.
And really good at realization. So Om is the guru of the universe.
Yeah. Does it matter at what note you're chanting Om?
I say no.
No.
It's like it's your tone. It's you find your voice today also.
Yeah.
It's different all the time. So
Yeah.
I would say no.
Okay.
I would.
Great.
Yeah.
Mary, this has been so interesting, and thank you so much for sharing your time. I'm excited to do our little video interview. We're going to talk about pranayama. So, Mary, as we close, do you want to share anything about what's coming up for you that maybe somebody who's interested in studying with you, like where you teach yoga, any workshops coming up that people might be interested in?
Thank you for asking. Well, my thing that's happening is a 6-month program in yoga psychology for the Nalanda Institute, and it starts this Friday. One Friday a month will be a quote-unquote famous speaker. It's Bob Thurman this Friday, and me. I don't know why me, but maybe it'll
'Cause you're
just be.
awesome.
I don't know. And then the 2 days of Saturday and Sunday are pretty much me and my wonderful co-teacher Marlee McGovern, who's administrating the thing too, and that's going to be once a month. So if you miss this month, there might be a way to get into the following 5 months, and if not, come to the Friday night lectures by the famous people and introduce yourself to me. And I do work for the Nalanda Institute through the Tibet House doing meditation program, and there'll be lots. I'll try to keep my website fresh. I teach Hatha yoga twice a week, once on Sunday and once on Tuesday, both at 12:30. And you can see the details. It's on the Upper West Side. It's on my website.
Great. That's Life in Motion?
Life in Motion, yeah.
I'm going to come to that Tuesday
that'd
class
be
soon.
fun.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Do you talk philosophy in your class?
I do.
I love that.
I hope
Perfect.
you do.
All right. And then your website is meditationmary.org?
.com.
.com. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
You must have got that early.
I guess I did. I don't know. I just thought it would be an easy to remember name.
It's great. Meditationmary.com.
Yeah, it's like Typhoid Mary is what I was thinking.
My partner Jimmy is making a musical with his friend about the story of Typhoid Mary.
Really?
Yeah, that's another conversation
how
for
great.
another day. All right, Mary, thank you so much. It's really nice to chat with you.
Me too.
Until next time, bye-bye. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Mary Reilly Nichols. If you're interested in hearing more about Mary's offerings, go to meditationmary.com. And if you'd like to learn more about the Nalanda Institute for Contemplative Sciences training in yoga psychology, of which Mary is the director, just go to nalandainstitute.org. Until next time, friends, namaste. Bye-bye.